So we're talking about the foundations of our time at Boys High. And before I introduce the next two speakers, I'd just like to go back to our teachers. And Caps, in your speech yesterday, honestly, I was so proud of you, and I was so proud for our year, what you did yesterday. Chief, as if those boys didn't get a moron listening to that. It made me, I love you even more than I did before yesterday morning, because you were awesome. But
it's a big time, right?
He talked about Caps mentioned the teachers, and our teachers, and it popped up. A couple of them have passed on this year, Mrs. Noble and Mr. Digby, both foxy in their own particular ways. And then Adi was going to visit Mrs. Vanetta, he said in the group chat. So she was my favourite. She was my favourite teacher. Ma Vanetta, a legend, absolute legend. She was. I was very fond of her. But there were all these wonderful people that role models. The teachers are the role models. And what Caps touched on yesterday. And maybe those teachers and Sergeant Camp, maybe if you get anything back from today, other than this was the best year ever, that those people that were they were just awesome, and they were such great role models, and our lives have been really, really positively touched by all of them. I mean, I started with Marius Finnis, Corpulate, and he was just out of teaching college. Jeez, but he was fit, and he was a really good man. And and then I ended up doing Afrikaans speech, and I could have done that without Mr. Ditburn and Mrs. Bagolki, because they were just awesome. And I think Douglas touched on them yesterday, and then there was history, and there was Drip Henry and Roy Hoggan, and they brought history alive. And then Mr. Digby, and he brought English alive. And there was, then just the art and the creativity, and all sides were, and they were just a joy. And I've mentioned John O'Ely, who was a personal favourite, because geez, I tried hard, and Peter Ron and I, we worked our socks off to try and get past Neil Davidson in maths, and we never ever did. And they're just these people, they were just in my brain, and they were fundamental, and you've all got them. I never did art, fortunately, so I didn't get to know Pat Glenn. And but his name popped in yesterday, a very special man, Mr. Eddie Dory, who we love. I loved Eddie more than Tully, to be fair. Between you and me, Tully still owes me a fucking $5 for The World Didn't End at the end of 1990. All of these people are just every time you think about them, you have like a warm feeling, not a wet feeling, a warm feeling. Although Harry reminded me about Miss Hopkins in Film 3. As young men were growing up, and she was a very good teacher. And really, the school was all about giving us the tools, basically the tools to reach our potential. And I look around here, and the chats yesterday, the chats today, I mean, you guys, potential has been reached. There are, academically, we're probably the best year ever, obviously. Psychologically, we have a preeminent professorial psychologist in the country from our class of 1998. Spiritually, you guys rock with your spirituality. I love it. I love to hear it. The Lord works in mysterious ways. He's touched some of you very differently to others, but that's okay. And so we go. Sexually, I think we've probably passed our peak. That's okay. But we all were given building blocks to basically reach our potential. And or to have a go at it anyway. So we've tried. And listen, I don't think we've finished. Actually, I think my best is still to come. I really do believe that. But no, the school gave us the building blocks. They gave us the potential. And I look around the room, and it's just wonderful to see how you've fulfilled your potential and how wonderful you've been. One of us was chosen to be special and to have potential and was given there was a pretty difficult challenge to be head boy of the school. It was an excellent choice. Mr. Malcolm Armstrong was a very wise man. And when Damon was appointed, I looked around the prefect's room, I didn't see anybody else there who was any good. In fact, I think Mr. Hussicott mentioned yesterday that, or Capster, that we were 18 prefects. Jeepers. No, good men and true. Dan will be the first to admit that we were a team, and without us, he as prefects, it would be much more difficult for him, and we backed him 100%, and his greatness is really thanks to us. So living vicariously, Damon, his first book came out just after we left school. It was called A Sinless Season. And geez, I read that thing and I was trying to see now who's he modelled it on. There must be somebody in the school, and I'm trying to think, well, was it Digby? Was it Neil Davidson? All these things, and to critical acclaim. So that was 82. The Sinless Season came out, and I didn't recognise myself, which was disappointing, obviously. And then we had a little bit of some short stories, which I love a short story. And actually, when we went off to the English Festival, there was a short story English Festival, and it changed my world. Chinua Achebe, the Nigerian guy, short stories, lovely. And then Damon was there, and Sean, and we stayed in Grahamstown. And the thing I remember was just the smell of doobie, the boarding house, which is quite special. And the thing said, "Where is Gopal?" Because Gopal was the guy who sorted out the house. But anyway, that was another story. And then, for the best, Damon missed out on a prize. He's missed out on a few, narrowly, but the best name for a novel or a book, A Beautiful Screaming of Pigs. Now, how did that not win a prize as a name for a book? Beautiful, beautiful. Loved it. Then we had The Quarry, a half-decent movie with Michael Shannon, yeah, good, one of my favourite actors. And then The Good Doctor, nominated for a book. I thought, I might get a feature in here. Because honestly, we have got some really good doctors in this group. Really good, top of the pops, honestly, really good. Charlie and Paul, ophthalmologists, awesome. Well, Greg, Jesus, so Greg, going forward, I mean, he's taught all the oaks that are going to be up our asses doing our prostates in the next 15 years, and even these robots and all that, so there's some awesome doctors, top doctors, and obviously know about Michael, he's the really good doctor. But, but Damon's doctor had nothing really in common with our doctors, other than if you did your community service, which is fine, that's okay, we'll move on. And then, in Imposter, in a Strange Room, that was really good, I enjoyed that. And then he did the Arctic Summer, which was personal for him, and about Passage to India guy. That was a very personal thing he did. And now he's released something called The Promise. Now, when the last time I was here, or the last one of these, then he sent a really good letter to the guys and said, "Look, I'm really sorry," and he said a few words, very well written, I have to say, and he finished by saying, "If I'm alive, 1, 2, able, 3, keen, I promise I'll be there." And his new book is called The Promise. And I'm sure, in part, and subconsciously, deep in the deep recesses, the book was actually
about you.
About us. It was about us. No, it was about us. And there was this sort of subconscious promise that he would be here today, and it's brought him today. It is awesome. You don't need a Booker Prize to know that you've written something special. You don't. I mean, Salome is my Maggie when I was growing up. And the characters, it's a South African history over 40 years, and it just looks at us and looks at our country, and you sort of recognise all the oaks. You recognise the minister, the dominie, you recognise the aunties and the uncles and the people, and it's a 40-year history in four sort of chapters. It's absolutely wonderful. And I'm proud of him. I'm really proud of him. And our year is proud of him. He has shone. He has shone almost as brightly as me. And it gives me the greatest of pleasure to introduce our head boy, Damon Galgut.
Gentlemen.
Drop the mic. Drop the mic, Damon. There we go.
Technology.
Short meeting. I probably am not going to be as articulate or entertaining as Dave Newman or many of the others that have spoken. I appreciate the good words though, Dave, thank you. At least one of you reads books still. That part was correct, not everything you said. I'm still very much in my sexual prime, I just wanted to let you know. I was talking to a cynical friend of mine in Cape Town before I came down and telling him I was coming to the school reunion, and he said, you know, isn't it strange that you keep hearing about these terrible school shootings, but you never hear about a school reunion shooting? I thought I might change that today. No one ducked under the table. No, I reflected on it and I thought, although it would make the occasion memorable for the survivors, I'm actually kind of fond of you all. So that seemed like a better place to start, because it might be something we all have in common, that I think we're all, in general, fond of each other. If you've travelled any distance, gone to any trouble to be here, I think it's out of that sense of fondness. And I know lots of you have friends from back then, sometimes close friends, even just an acquaintance from way back. But even if the guy you're sitting next to this afternoon doesn't look that familiar, or you don't know everything about them, I think you still share a fondness because of the simple fact that we went through 5 years here together, more or less, some more, some less. And that those 5 years shaped us into what we are. Not entirely, but it was a beginning. It was 5 years in that wonky gap between being a kid and being a man. It's an important extended moment for all of us. And not everyone's going to have, you know, warm and happy memories of that period, because not everyone had a warm and happy life. And I'll tell you that my adolescent years, the years I spent at school, were not happy years. That's not a fault of the school. It was a fault of the rest of my life, but I know that's true for some other people. But the fact remains that for all of us, those years would have mattered. You know, they were absolutely foundational. So good or bad, it mattered. You know, for me, those 5 years began and ended with memorable moments, which kind of bookend that period. And the first happened on my first day at school, and I'm sorry to trot it out again because it was part of the speech that was vicariously given on my behalf last time. We were all nervous, self-conscious. I sat in the classroom, and in front of me was Panos Kyriakou. And Mr. Lewin, the geography teacher, came in and he wanted to send something down to the boarding house, and he looked around and his eye fell on Panos and he said, you, boy, are you a boarder? And Panos said, no, sir, I'm Greek. Only afterwards I said to him, like, what did you mean? And he said, no, I thought he said, are you a pora? That stayed with me. It still does. My last moment of my last day at school, I'd just written my final exam, which was maths, and I knew I'd done really badly. I didn't care at all. And I was going around to various teachers and saying my farewells, and I popped in on a teacher whose name I actually don't remember, but I believe it was Mrs. DeToy. And she said to me, how was your maths exam? I said, no, it wasn't so good. And, you know, I just came to say goodbye. And I was suddenly kind of overcome with the sentiment of the moment, and I'm sorry to say I started to cry. And Mrs. DeToy said, no, I'm sure they'll push the maths marks up. But sandwiched between those two moments are lots of others, which, you know, I remember some of them absolutely arbitrary. I was, you know, thinking about coming to the school, and what came to me was a memory of being in Chalky Somerville's class one day and hearing a noise from way, way off in the school, somebody shouting, and then the words sort of became coherent, and it was the, "Who hit me on the head? Who hit me on the head?" And everybody just sat in silence, and the sound came to the door, and the door opened, and there was a man in his underpants with blood running down his head saying, "Who hit me on the head?" And he had been cycling through the school and somebody hit him on the head and took his clothes. What that memory has to do with anything else, I don't know, but it's very, very central to my memory of the school, and I'm sure for lots of you, it's those arbitrary, kind of rootless memories that have stayed with you. I mean, some of them have come back today, just walking around and talking to you. I remember playing for some astronomically low rugby team, and practicing against an equally inept team, and Tony van Aswegen was coaching us, and he stopped us at one point. He said, "Yes, you are so terrible, man." And he sent the other team off, and then he said to us, "Now try and score." As I recall, we still struggle. So in amongst all of this, you know, I have other memories that aren't so rootless and that really are significant because they were part of growing up and becoming who you eventually end up as. And I'll tell you honestly, I have lots of memories being amongst you all, growing a little bit older with you, learning bits and pieces about the world to come, and part of that for me was being frightened of you guys, frightened of your judgment and your power, and I'm sure lots of us felt that way. It's part of those years, right? It's not entirely unjustified. You know, we hurt each other as boys. I'm sure with my sharp tongue, I dealt out a few hurts of my own. But yeah, I was on the receiving end from some of you guys too. I also remember liking some of you guys enormously and having some conversations, even way back then, that still have a kind of pulsating significance for me because they were important in shaping me or making me or leading me somewhere. And that really mattered too. I didn't learn that much maths or science, but I learned quite a lot about living while I was here. And I want to say that again, it was the start of learning about life. It's a kind of an endless process, I guess. So I'll be even more straight with you guys. I know what today's about. You know, we're supposed to eulogize that time and talk about the best years of our lives and the school on the hill and how nothing has ever been better since. I'm not sure that's true for everyone. And I'm not going to go down that road because that's not where the significance of those years lies for me. I don't mean any disrespect to the school or to your good selves. In that process, quite the opposite. Those 5 years were too real to kind of cover up with cliches. So, some of the fine and excellent things that I remember. One of them, I remember Mr. Armstrong, the headmaster, who maybe not everyone felt warmly about. I remember him taking me out of class one day and walking with me through the school and having a conversation with me, a very personal conversation which really changed how I felt about myself and how the rest of my life unfolded, and that had a huge value to me. It still does. And I don't think that sort of conversation would happen at any school. I also remember Mr. Armstrong calling a special assembly to announce that the very first black kid was coming here, Stanley Nchituka. He was the son of a diplomat, and we were told we had to make him welcome, and I knew that was a really important moment for the school and maybe for the country. But I also remember in the lesson that followed, the teacher, I'll leave his name out of this, saying to us, "Boys, this used to be a school I wanted to send my son to, not anymore." That wasn't such a great moment. And like you, I guess I have, you know, warm, amused recollections of some of the teachers and their eccentricities, their idiosyncrasies, and those were real. But I also remember it was common practice to beat boys, especially back then. And some of the beatings we received were something close to assault, actually, in retrospect. So that's part of the memory I have here too. And I think, you know, coming back here can only really be meaningful if we acknowledge that some of it was bad. You know, that's life. One other thing I remember is the song, of course, that names this occasion, and I remember singing it on the very last day of school, 40 years on, when afar and asunder parted are those who are singing today. Guys, the one thing I knew when I was singing that day was that 40 years on was never going to happen to me. Never. I mean, even the age of 40 was something that was never going to happen to me. It's something that happened to other people. You guys maybe, but me, no. And now look what's happened. You know, the age of 40 is already a kind of a distant sight in the rearview mirror. And it is 40 years on. And reunited are those, or some of those sadly, who were singing that day. 40 years on, gentlemen, that's where we are. And by now, it's real, it's believable. Some of you, I know, have had sons pass through this school. Some of you, you know, especially the Rissikhaus lot, because they started early, have had grandsons pass through. But I hope we're all realistic enough to know that if, you know, we were to sing 40 years on today, it would no longer be true. For most of us, there isn't going to be a 40 years on from now, with a possible exception of Elon Musk, but, you know, he wasn't in our year, the scum. What's happened in the last 4 decades since we left school? I mean, just to take some arbitrary things, cell phones were invented, the internet, communism crumbled, the Berlin Wall came down. We sent a rover to Mars, Nelson Mandela came out of prison, South Africa had democratic elections. All of those things were seemingly impossible events, seen from the perspective of our 18-year-old selves, way back when. What's happened to you guys in your lives? I mean, the truth is, for most of you, I don't know. I might learn a little bit this afternoon. But I'm willing to bet that some of you have lived through some impossible personal events too. It's remarkable material in every human life. Most of us have struggled with the same things, I dare say, and maybe we're proud of, you know, similar sort of outcomes. And I don't know what those are for you guys, but they're fairly modest in my case. I'm proud of a few good relationships that I've found, not all romantic, some friendships. A bit of, you know, business success or material success, if you like. But I'm sure we share